I've always believed that people reveal more through silence than through speech. Maybe that's why I became a photographer. To study what hides behind eyes, to capture moments that words could never confess. My name's Noah, and until last spring, my life revolved around lenses, light, and the quiet rhythm of college days that all looked the same. I wasn't invisible exactly, but I'd learned to exist at the edges of other people's noise. When I first saw Drew, he was the kind of person you couldn't help but notice. He had that casual confidence that filled a room before he even spoke. The sort of presence that made people laugh louder, straighten up, and watch him when he passed. He played for the college basketball team, and even from a distance, there was something magnetic about him. Something untamed but careful, like someone aware of their own gravity. Our first real interaction happened in the most ordinary way. I'd been assigned to photograph the basketball team for a class project, a series called A Human Form in Motion. I wasn't thrilled about it. Sports photography wasn't my thing. I preferred stillness, portraits where people forgot they were being seen. But when I raised my camera to take my first shot, Drew looked right at me, not in the casual, distracted way most people do when a lens finds them. He looked at me, steady, curious, almost like he was the one observing me instead. "Do I need to pose or something?" he'd asked, grinning as the rest of the team joked in the background. I shook my head. "You don't have to pose. Just breathe." That made him laugh, a low, honest sound that seemed to fill the whole gym. I took the picture right then, his eyes bright, his expression somewhere between surprise and amusement. When I developed that image later, it didn't look like the usual athlete photo. It looked intimate, even though we'd barely spoken. After that, he started showing up more often. At first, I thought it was coincidence. He'd wander into the art studio while I was printing photos, saying he was just curious about the process. But he always ended up standing behind me, watching quietly as the images appeared in the chemical trays. I'd explain how light and shadow worked, how the smallest movement could change a whole story within a frame. He'd listen, really listen, like no one ever had before. One evening, the air smelled like rain, and most of the campus had cleared out early. I was alone in the studio, developing prints under the soft red light. The door opened, and there he was again, hair damp, hoodie clinging to his shoulders. He didn't say anything at first, just walked up beside me, his eyes fixed on a photograph slowly surfacing in the tray. It was him, caught mid-laugh, sunlight glancing off his face. "You make me look different," he said quietly. I looked up, surprised. "That's because you are different when no one's watching." For a moment, he didn't reply. He just watched me, eyes softer now, less guarded. The air between us felt heavy, charged with something I couldn't quite name. I wanted to look away, but I couldn't. It was like standing too close to a flame and realizing too late that warmth can also burn. He broke the silence with a crooked smile. "You really see people, don't you?" I shrugged. Sometimes I wish I didn't. He nodded, like he understood more than he was willing to admit. Then he picked up one of the prints, studying it. "You caught me off guard here," he said, tracing his thumb along the edge. "Guess that's what makes it real." I tried to act casual, to ignore how close he was standing. But every breath I took seemed to pull in the scent of rain and soap and something purely him. When he finally turned to leave, he hesitated at the door, glancing back. "You should take more photos like that," he said. "Ones that feel alive." After he left, I stood there in the dim light, listening to the faint echo of his footsteps fading down the hallway. My heart was racing, and I couldn't understand why. Maybe it was because no one had ever looked at my work like that, like they saw me through it. Or maybe it was because, for the first time, I felt seen in a way that wasn't entirely comfortable. The days that followed blurred together, but he kept appearing at the cafeteria, by the library steps, near the photo lab, always with that same teasing grin, always with some casual excuse to talk. And every time, the conversations lasted longer. We'd drift from jokes to real stories. His childhood in Seattle, my habit of wandering the city at night with a camera, the things we both missed but never said aloud. There was something easy about being near him, but also something dangerous. One afternoon, as we sat on the bleachers after his practice, I raised my camera again, half out of habit, He didn't pose or smile this time. He just stared at me, sweat glistening on his skin, his breathing slow and uneven. "You're going to make me look like a mess," he said. "Maybe that's the truth of you," I replied before I could stop myself. He chuckled, but his eyes stayed on me a moment too long. "Careful, Noah," he said softly. "You might start making me believe you actually see me." I didn't have a response, because maybe in that second, I realized I already did. That night, when I developed a new roll of film, I lingered on one frame, him sitting in silence, head tilted slightly, eyes distant but alive. It wasn't a picture of a basketball player or a campus favorite. It was Drew, the real one, the one hidden beneath charm and laughter. And as I looked at that image, a strange ache filled my chest. Something was starting, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. But when someone looks at you like you're the only person who sees the truth, you don't walk away. You stay, even when you know you shouldn't. I turned off the studio lights that night and whispered to myself, "Don't fall for him." But it was already too late. I didn't know then that the look he gave me that first day would change everything, that it would pull me into a secret I couldn't escape, a story that would begin in quietness and end in silence. And yet, even now, I can still remember the way he looked at me, like he was searching for something he'd lost a long time ago. And for one fleeting moment, I almost believed I could help him find it. It started with a knock. Soft at first, hesitant, the kind that doesn't want to wake anyone. I opened the door, and there he was, Drew, standing in the hallway with his hood up, eyes shadowed, voice low. "Can I come in?" he asked, though he was already stepping inside before I could answer. The clock on my desk read 11:47. It was late, even for him. He sat on the edge of my bed, elbows resting on his knees, hands fidgeting like he was trying to hold something invisible together. "I just needed to get away," he muttered. "Everyone's at some party." I couldn't stand the noise. His voice cracked a little at the end, and it startled me. How human he suddenly seemed without the crowd around him, without the confidence that usually wrapped him like armor. I offered him water, but he shook his head. "I just needed to see you," he said quietly. Those words, simple, reckless, hung in the air between us. My room felt smaller, warmer, like the walls had started listening. I didn't know what to say, so I didn't. I just sat beside him, close enough to feel the heat radiating off his skin. He turned toward me then, eyes searching, uncertain. "You make me feel calm," he said, almost to himself. Then, after a pause, he added, "But this is weird, right?" I laughed softly, mostly to fill the silence. "Yeah, probably." He smiled faintly, that familiar half-smile that had undone me from the start. "You can have me, you know," he said suddenly, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just don't tell anyone." My breath caught. He didn't move closer, not yet, but the meaning in his eyes was unmistakable. The world outside seemed to disappear. I should have said something rational, should have asked him what he meant, or if he was sure, but instead, I leaned in, and he didn't stop me. When his lips met mine, it wasn't fire first. It was something slower, like recognition, like we had both been waiting for the world to go quiet long enough to hear what our hearts had been saying all along. He pulled away first, exhaling shakily, eyes wide with a mix of fear and relief. "Promise me," he whispered. "No one can know." I nodded, though part of me already knew promises made in the dark rarely survive daylight. After that night, our world shifted. What had been casual glances turned into coded messages. What had been conversations in the open became whispers behind closed doors. He'd show up at my dorm after practice, sweat still clinging to his neck, his laugh softer now, private. Sometimes we just talked for hours about everything and nothing. His father's expectations, my fear of never being enough, the strange loneliness of pretending you have it all figured out. Other nights, words dissolved into touch. His hands trembled the first time he reached for me, but by the second time they didn't. We'd lie there, breathing in rhythm, and for a while, the world felt right. It didn't matter that we couldn't be seen. It didn't matter that what we had existed only in the quiet. But secrecy has a way of staining even the sweetest moments. We avoided each other on campus. In the cafeteria, He'd sit with his teammates, all loud jokes and confidence, while I sat across the room pretending not to notice. Sometimes our eyes met for a second too long, and I'd see it, the guilt flickering behind his practiced smile. Once, after a game, I stood at the edge of the court, camera in hand, watching him bask in the noise of victory. When his teammates pulled him into a hug, I felt something twist inside me, something sharp and jealous and unfamiliar. He looked over, just for a second, and I thought I saw him hesitate, like he wanted to cross the distance between us. But then someone slapped his back, and the moment was gone. Later that night, he showed up at my door again. "You can't look at me like that in public," he said quietly. "Like what?" I asked. "Like you're the only one who knows me." I swallowed hard. "Maybe I am." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "You don't get it. If people find out, everything changes. The team, my family, my whole life. I'm not asking you to tell anyone," I said. "I just want to stop feeling like a secret you regret." His eyes softened then, the fight leaving his voice. "I don't regret you," he whispered. "I just don't know how to live with what I feel." He reached for me then, and the argument dissolved into silence again. It was always like that. Words turning into touch, fear turning into warmth. We were caught in a loop of wanting and hiding, needing and pretending. Days blurred into weeks. He'd text me at odd hours, "You awake?" And I always was. We'd meet by the lake, where the water caught the reflection of the campus lights like scattered stars. He'd rest his head on my shoulder and talk about dreams he never told anyone else. Wanted to quit the team, to travel, to start over somewhere far away. I'd listen, even though I knew he'd never leave. There were moments when I almost believed he might choose me, that the quiet between us could grow into something real. But then morning would come, and he'd slip out before anyone saw. The bed would still be warm where he'd been, but the air would feel colder somehow. Still, I told myself it was enough. That loving him in secret was better than not loving him at all. I convinced myself that the stolen moments meant more precisely because they were hidden. But beneath that fragile happiness, something darker began to stir, a quiet ache, a warning I refused to hear. One evening, as we sat in my room, he looked up from where he was lying on the floor and said, "Sometimes I wish I could tell people about you." "Then why don't you?" I asked, my voice careful. He smiled sadly. "Because once I say it out loud, it becomes real, and real things can break." That answer should have scared me. Instead, it made me love him more. He left that night with a lingering kiss and a whispered, "You know I care about you, right?" I nodded, even though something inside me felt unsettled. When the door closed behind him, I sat in the quiet and realized how deep I'd already fallen. The boy who had once been my subject, my muse, had become my secret, my addiction. I didn't know it then, but the same words that bound us together, "Just don't tell anyone," would be the ones that tore us apart. And as I stared at the last photo I'd taken of him, his smile faint, eyes unreadable, I couldn't help but wonder how long love could survive when it was forced to live in the shadows. I used to think silence was comforting, but now it felt like punishment. Weeks had passed since Drew and I first crossed that invisible line, and though his presence still carried the same gravity, something between us had shifted. The messages came less often. The knocks on my door grew rare. When he did show up, he was distracted, always checking his phone, glancing at the door like he was waiting to leave. The warmth that once filled my room after midnight was being replaced by something colder, quieter, and crueler. It began subtly, the kind of distance that hides behind excuses. He said he was busy with training, with exams, with friends who needed him. But I noticed how he laughed a little too easy with others now, especially with a girl named Kara, one of the cheerleaders who always lingered near the court. I told myself it didn't mean anything. I told myself he was just being Drew, the same charming, careless version of himself that the whole campus adored. But denial is a soft kind of poison. It numbs you before it kills you. The real unraveling happened on a Friday night. I'd gone to the gym to return a borrowed camera lens, not planning to stay. But through the glass windows, I saw him, laughing, leaning close to Kara as she touched his arm. The sight hit me like a physical blow. He looked free. He looked unburdened. And I suddenly realized that the version of him I loved only existed when no one else was watching. I left without speaking to him, but later that night, my phone buzzed. "You around?" The words glowed on my screen, simple and heavy. I stared at them for a long time before replying. "You should be with her." He didn't respond right away. When he finally did, his message was short. "It's not like that. Stop overthinking." I wanted to believe him, but belief had started to feel like betrayal to myself. When he came by 2 days later, I didn't open the door immediately. He knocked again, harder this time. "Come on, Noah, don't do this," he called softly. I let him in, but the air between us was different. Tense, uneasy. He stood by the window, arms crossed, avoiding my gaze. "People are starting to talk," he said finally. "About what?" "About me. About us." His voice cracked slightly, and for the first time, I saw fear in his eyes. "So that's what you're worried about," I said, quietly. "Not me, just what people might think." "That's not fair," he snapped. "You know how this would go if anyone found out." "You don't get it. No, I can't lose everything for something that might not even last." His words hung in the air, sharp and deliberate. I laughed bitterly. Try to keep my voice steady. "Something that might not last? Is that what this is to you? Temporary?" He stepped closer, his expression softening. "You're twisting my words." "No," I said. "I'm just hearing them clearly for the first time." We stood there, inches apart, and for the first time, I saw the truth behind his eyes, the hesitation, the shame, the fear of being seen for who he really was. I wanted to reach for him, to remind him of all the moments that had felt real, but something in me refused. Instead, I walked past him and sat on the bed, staring at the floor. He sighed, ran a hand through his hair, and said quietly, "I didn't mean to hurt you." "Then why does it feel like you're trying so hard to—" He didn't answer. He just sat beside me, his hands trembling slightly. We stayed like that for a while. Two people sitting in the ruins of something they'd built in silence. The next day, I found one of my photographs torn in half on my desk. The one I'd taken of him laughing under the studio light, his guard completely down. I knew instantly who had done it. Maybe he thought it was safer that way, to destroy the evidence of something that never should have existed. But as I stared at the jagged edges, anger began to bloom where hurt had been. For the first time, I stopped waiting for him to come back. Still, secrets have a way of haunting the air long after they're broken. A few days later, a rumor began spreading on campus. Something about a player on the basketball team getting too close to another guy. It was vague, cruel, and sharp enough to cut through every layer of denial. People whispered in the hallways. Laughter followed behind me when I passed. That evening, Drew stormed into my room, slamming the door behind him. His face was pale, his jaw clenched. "What did you do?" he demanded. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb. Noah, you told someone. You had to." I stood up, my chest tightening. "I didn't tell anyone. Do you really think I'd want this to get out?" He ran a hand down his face, pacing. "Everything's falling apart. Coach called me in. The team's whispering. Do you understand what this could do to me?" His words struck harder than they should have. To him. Always him. I took a step closer. "You're not the only one this affects. Drew, I've been living in your shadow for months, hiding every part of myself just to protect you." He looked at me then, anger giving way to something like guilt. But he didn't apologize. He just whispered, "You ruined everything." The words hit deeper than any slap could. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room felt too small, too fragile to hold what we'd become. Finally, I said, "The only thing I ruined was myself trying to love you in silence." He froze, his mouth opening slightly as if to speak, but nothing came out. I walked past him, my heart pounding, and opened the door. "You should go," I said quietly. He hesitated for a long moment, then left without a word. When the door clicked shut, I sat on the floor and let the stillness swallow me. I thought about the way he used to smile, the way he'd whisper my name like it was something sacred, and I realized that every beautiful thing we had built had been built on fear. Love can't live where truth is forbidden. That night, I deleted every message, every photo, every trace of him, except one, the torn image. I kept it, not because I couldn't let go, but because it reminded me of what happens when love hides in the dark too long. Outside, rain began to fall, tapping softly against the window. For once, I didn't feel the urge to run after him. I just watched the droplets slide down the glass and whispered to myself, he wanted a secret, but secrets don't survive the light. And though the ache in my chest felt endless, somewhere beneath it, a quiet strength began to grow, one that whispered, you survived loving him. You'll survive losing him. 2. The night of our unspoken truth arrived without warning. A cold wind pressed against the windows, and the rain outside sounded like static, a reminder of how fragile everything between us had become. I was sitting on the couch, hands clasped, staring at the blank TV screen, when River walked in. His face looked tired, eyes red from what I guessed were hours of indecision. The quiet between us was heavier than any argument could have been. He sat across from me, knees almost touching mine, but neither of us moved closer. For a moment, I thought he might still choose to lie, to build another fragile story we could both hide behind. But instead, he sighed, and the truth began to pour out. I told him, he said softly. My heart stuttered. Told who? Caleb. About us. The name hit me like a stone thrown in still water, small at first, then spreading in silent waves. Caleb, his best friend, the one who'd always stood between us like an unspoken wall. You told him? I repeated, disbelief shaking my voice. River nodded slowly. He deserved to know after everything I made him believe. His voice cracked, and for a second, I saw not the confident man I'd fallen for, but someone lost, scared of his own heart. He said he already knew, that he'd seen it in the way I looked at you. The words twisted something inside me, half relief, half heartbreak. So what happens now? I asked quietly. River looked down, his fingers tracing the edge of his sleeve. He said I needed to decide who I really am before I destroy everyone around me. His eyes lifted to mine, glassy but resolute. And he's right. I can't keep pretending. I waited for what came next. A confession, a promise, a goodbye. But River only sat there, breathing shallow, like each second was balancing on a knife's edge. I'm not asking you to wait, he said finally. You don't deserve to live in someone else's shadow. I wanted to tell him I didn't care, that I'd rather live in the dark with him than in the light without him. But something inside me shifted. I realized I couldn't save him from his fear. Love, no matter how strong, can't breathe if it's always forced to hide. When he stood, I stood too. We didn't say anything for a while, just stared at each other, memorizing what couldn't be kept. Then he stepped closer, pressed his forehead to mine, and whispered the same words that had started everything. You can have me, he breathed. Just don't tell anyone. Only this time I didn't nod. I pulled back and said, No, River, I don't want a secret anymore. He looked at me as if I'd taken the ground from beneath him, not with anger, but with sorrow. Then I guess this is goodbye, he murmured. I watched him leave, his reflection fading in the rain-slick glass until it was just me. The quiet, the couch, the echo of what we were. My chest felt hollow, but not empty, because for the first time, I wasn't hiding either. Days passed. Weeks. The world went on as if nothing had happened. But everything inside me had shifted. I began to notice small things again. Sunlight on water, the hum of morning traffic, the way laughter sounded lighter when it wasn't built on lies. And though his absence still ached, it also gave me space to breathe, to exist without fear. Then one morning my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I'm ready to stop hiding. Can we talk? It was River. I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the words, feeling a strange calm settle in. Maybe this was what healing looked like, not forgetting, but understanding why things had to fall apart. I finally typed back, if you're ready to be real, I'm here. Hours later, there was a knock on my door. When I opened it, River stood there, no pretense, no hesitation, just him. His eyes met mine, and I knew the secret we'd once guarded had turned into something else, something honest. We didn't rush to touch. We didn't need to. The silence between us was no longer heavy. It was full, of memory, forgiveness, and something new waiting to grow. He smiled faintly. No more secrets? I smiled back. No more secrets. And for the first time, when he reached for my hand, I didn't have to look over my shoulder. I just held on. Because love, real love, doesn't survive in whispers. It thrives when spoken aloud.